He's at it again. President Obama is preparing to ask Congress to raise the debt ceiling. According to Treasury Department officials, the Obama administration wants to increase America's borrowing limit by a mere $1.2 trillion, therefore raising the national debt limit $1 trillion. And for those of you wondering, yes, this is the same guy who chastised George W. Bush for raising the national debt back in 2008.
The way Bush has done it over the last 8 years is to take out a credit card from the Bank of China in the name of our children, driving up our national debt from $5 trillion for the first 42 presidents. Number 43 added $4 trillion by his lonesome, so that we now have over $9 trillion of debt that we are going to have to pay back. $30,000 for every man, woman, and child. That's irresponsible. It's unpatriotic.
I think it's now 50 grand per child, which is incredibly patriotic. We need the extra large abacus for this. Bush raised it by $4 trillion over 8 years. That's irresponsible. Obama has raised it by $6 trillion over 3 years. That's incredibly responsible. And this increase will take place automatically unless lawmakers reject it by January the 14th. And by happy coincidence, Congress will still be in recess at that time. How clever of the White House. Joining me now with reaction from the Fox Business Network, Charles Payne, and the Executive Director of Public Notice, Gretchen Hamel. Charles, $16.2 trillion. How high can this ceiling go?
Well, Greece is what, about 150% of GDP? We hit 100% debt to GDP ratio already, so it's crazy. It's absolutely nuts. And the thing is, if you remember when the White House was going against Paul Ryan, they laid out all the reasons why raising the debt ceiling had nothing to do with spending money, but previous obligations.
Right.
Well, in this case, who's making these obligations and why? Why is President Obama making these obligations on my behalf?
Right.
I didn't ask him to. I'm asking him not to. Although I will tell you in the introduction, you made a great point. Something of a stroke of genius to do this after winning the payroll tax cut debate while Congress is away. And by the way, before Americans get their credit card bills for Christmas spending, because believe me, we're going to be back on that fiscally responsible bandwagon in just a couple of weeks.
Now, you mentioned the Greek comparison, 150% of GDP. And when you do it like that, it can look like America isn't in quite the same trough of hell as other parts of the Western world, except when you look at it, Gretchen, in hard dollar numbers. Nobody's talking about the T word. Nobody's using trillion, except Greece is a few rinky-dink billions here and there. The word is unique to us.
It is very unique to us, and I would add that we're not there yet. And most economists will tell you that we're not too far off from being Greece. But if we need a warning sign, I mean, we just have to look over at the newspapers in Europe to see and how it has played an effect here in our markets. If we do not do something to rein in our debt, and if we do not do something to rein in government spending, we will see Greece happen right here in our streets.
But you know something, you say that and other people say that. There's millions of Americans for whom this doesn't matter. It has no reality.
But it does.
It has, but they think to it, well, it's 16.2 trillion. What would be wrong if it went to 18.3 trillion or 23.7?
But there has a lot of consequences for taxpayers and for Americans as a whole. It's the consequences of inflation. It's the consequences of higher taxes. It's the consequences of not having those promises, the obligations that President Obama was talking about of Medicare and Social Security and Medicaid available to us. It's the consequences of not being able to have a Defense Department because we can no longer afford to protect ourselves.
Yeah, well, how about putting it in primal terms, Charles? It's clear American government has outspent America's ability to pay for it. When you're up at this level, you're getting very near the stage where you're outspending the planet's ability to fund it.
Well, you know, you talk about Greek billions. At least Greece can be saved somehow. You know, the ECB and the rest of their neighbors can print up money. No one can save America. Now, we can go to China hat in hand, and we can go to, I mean, think about the amount of money we're talking. Now, speaking of Greece, they just put out a budget. 2/3 of the budget going to pay interest.
Right.
You're right. The average American may be sleeping on this to one degree or another, but it's like a cancer. And at some point, it could be one of these things where we look around and it's terminal. There's no way to fix it other than falling off into the ocean.
He talks about 2/3 being spent on just paying off debt. We're borrowing 36 cents out of every dollar.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. We're going to be at that 2/3 before too long.
But we're borrowing $1/5 of $1 billion every hour, and the interest on that debt is covering right now maybe about 80% of the cost of the People's Liberation Army of China. The Rome in its final period of decline did not institutionally tell Roman taxpayers you got to pick up the tab for the Visigoth military in perpetuity. There's no precedent for this.
No, there's no precedent for this. And what the root cause of the problem is, and the reason that we're at $15.1 trillion in debt right now, and that's only going up, is because of our government's chronic addiction, or their chronic overspending. I mean, how long have we been overspending like this? Bush added to it, Obama's added to it. Who is actually going to have the guts to scale it back?
You answer that question, Charles. Who's got the guts to put a stake in that sucker?
Ron Paul? And that's the only name that comes to mind. But realistically, you know what, though, ultimately it's our fault, too. I mean, we have to admit it's Americans' fault because forever we've always voted for the politician that's promised us the soft landing. Even when we knew it was dire, the person that says, I'll feather that fall for you, no matter what it costs your kids or your grandkids, and we've always said, okay, we've always housed the deal, and I guess the president thinks we're going to make it again.
No, but we've seen a difference. The American public is fed up with government spending. More now than ever, the Gallup poll showed earlier this month that they are scared of the government. And number one issue next to economy and jobs is government spending and the debt. The public is fed up, and it's about time.
It is about time. Absolutely.
And hopefully they will be holding their members of Congress accountable.
Are enough of the public fed up? By some measures, 67% of the American people receive some form of federal benefit or another. It's easy to be fed up, but it's a lot harder to say, okay, I'm going to do without this federal program and that federal program.
And it's because we're not being honest with the public. You have to look at Merkel. I mean, she did a great service to her country a few weeks back when she said, I am going to be honest with you. This is going to be hard, and this is going to take a few years to get over. We have no one saying that here in America.
No, and we still think we can kick the can down the road.
Yes.
What if there's no road, Charles? What if there's a washed-out bridge and we're just kicking the can over into the abyss?
Sadly, you know, and here's the sad thing, we actually have a chance to see where the road we're going down because we see Europe there already, and we see a mushroom cloud over the horizon, and we know we're driving at it at 1,000,000 miles an hour, Mark. To the point made earlier, we don't know the exact number, but we know we're barreling at it at 1,000,000 miles an hour, and we're going to hit it.
And do you think realistically that drift is the way to bet? I mean, Charles was talking, well, Ron Paul's serious about it. He's going to cut $1 trillion out. You're not hearing that talk. He's not going to be the nominee. Mitt Romney's likely to be the nominee, and he ain't talking like that.
No, he's not talking like that. I mean, talking about the specific numbers probably setting themselves up for failure, but talking about taking on some cuts and taking on those hard things of reforming Medicare, Medicaid, thinking about cutting back defense spending. Those are unpopular things, but they need to be talked about. Politicians are great about talking about it. Every debate this year was surrounding government spending. Today, we only cut $7 billion this past fiscal year. And $7 billion seems like a lot, especially to the Greece.
That's true.
That's 30 minutes of our budget.
That's what we borrow in about a day and a half. Thanks, guys. Coming up, Iran threatens to close a popular waterway used to transport oil around the world. And now, not only are there concerns that the price of oil could spike, some